Hey, Christian, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Breezy.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I am wonderful. I'm alive and I'm free to choose. So that's why I'm here.
Hey, that's a great perspective. I really want to ask you about your podcast. I've been following you for a while now, and I want to hear more about the Oilfield Leader and kind of what inspired it and how that's been going for you.
That's a great question. I really appreciate that. I've been working in the oil field. I've been working in oil and gas about 6 years, and recently, about March, I was let go. I was laid off, and I had some time to reflect on the time I had spent in the oil field, and all the people that had really taken their time to educate me and help me. And I paused really, and I wrote a letter, and I posted it on LinkedIn about my gratitude for what the oil field has done for me, oil and gas as an industry, and the individuals. And it was really starting with a point of gratitude for everything that I had been given that I realized, there is a great market that needs to be served, and it's really oil field operators. And I decided that I was going to give back to the operator, but hopefully in a much larger way than I could just affect by individuals at shift change. Many times we'd have a shift change that would go an extra hour and a half where I'm still there because I'm having such a great talk with the operator. And this way I can leverage the power of modern media and reach out to operators who need more information.
Absolutely. I agree with that because after working in oil and gas about 7 years, I felt similar. Uh, I had that perspective where I wanted to share some of what the experiences were, and not just the experiences, but the growth and the grit that comes with working in oil and
Yeah.
gas, and especially West Texas, because you always hear the negative and you always hear the horror stories. And I mean, personally, I've been laid off before, and I certainly did not write a letter of gratitude. It was kind of bittersweet.
Sure.
And I mean, in hindsight, you can always look back and see, the value and what you learned and how it shaped you. But you were really proactive with, just seeing the gratitude for your experiences in that moment, and really seeing it from that bird's eye view of, this is what I went through, this is what I've experienced, and let me be a guiding light for people that are maybe new to the industry or don't understand what goes into it, especially when we get all that negative pushback about how terrible we are in the oil and gas industry is demonized. But you're an individual working in these facilities in these conditions to feed your family and build a life for yourself. And so it's hard to find that balance between a narrative that works for you and your experiences and being able to share that. And it's very brave to put yourself out there in hopes that you're going to shine that light.
I really do appreciate that because generally by nature I'm outgoing, but generally I'm very private. Like I've never left a Google review or anything like that. No matter how much I love the pizza at your place, I am not leaving a public Google review. But coming into this, I realized that part of my own individual growth and my journey is recognizing all the advantages that I've been given that other people don't have. So it's incumbent upon me, if I have a voice and I have a perspective, then I have to address certain issues that other people can't. And I understand really very well what it's like, as you said, to get lost in my own forest and I only see trees.
Mm.
And sometimes it gets very difficult because, like, if you're an operator and you're working a frac at 3 in the morning and the chems are not coming out of the ISO, you don't want to have to shut the frac down. The company man is coming. You need to go and see what's going on, but you can't because you need to sit at the panel and you need to control because they're changing the dosages constantly. Plus, it's cold. Plus, it's raining. And now the ISO is frozen, so you may slip on it. Oh, and you're having problems at home with your wife and your kids. And your mom is also, maybe has to go to an old age home.
Right.
Let's start piling on all of the problems. Any problem that any individual has, an oil field worker has. The difference is that oil field worker is literally risking his life so someone across the country can complain about it on their iPhone.
Absolutely. And, like when you're in that vulnerable state and you are being challenged and taxed mentally, you're alone, like you said, especially for an operator, because the shift changes in the middle of the night. you have that you're battling on top of everything else. Because for me, working in the oil field and working 10, 12 hour days just during the day was challenging, being on location, maybe being the only female, or having a group of guys that have worked together for years, and you're always kind of the odd one out one way or another.
Right.
And then if you're far away from your family, there's problems at home, but there's nothing you can do about it. You are just growing that vulnerable space. And then again, you're on your own with it, and then you're getting on your iPhone and you're seeing that people are hating on the service that you're providing. But
Right.
I think a lot of that negativity that's projected is from the lack of understanding. And you just think the oil field is bad. And as a whole, you can absolutely see where we're still problematic. We need to step it up. We need to do different things. But we're also not getting the credit of how far we've come and the changes that have been implemented, the companies that are literally in place to make sure that we are becoming more environmentally conscious, that we're making the right steps in the right direction. But nobody is talking about that because it's easier just to project the bad and to believe the negative. And so then you, as that individual operator at shift change, dealing with all of that, how did you grow, and what got you through those challenging times? Because I know for myself, it took a lot of grit, and it took a
Yeah.
lot of determination to kind of get your mind wrapped around where you were and why you were doing it.
That's really fantastic. And it's true. See, very few people can understand what it's like to work in the oil field and the brotherhood that there is if you don't work in it. The closest that I've found through my informal asking and investigations is the military. They are the closest people who have said that this is similar to the experiences they've had and it's what they enjoy. I think frequently about Wallace Wattles, and he wrote The Science of Getting Rich back in 1901. And he says, don't don't despair or complain about the companies because they're the ones, the big, oh, he said the steel magnates, because again, this is back in 1901. He's like, so don't rail against the steel magnates or today, the big media conglomerates or companies, because they're the ones who have set the economic stage for you to work in. And don't rail against the corrupt politicians, because without them, there would be anarchy. When the time comes, they will be done away with, because everything is always in a process of change. And so therefore, I understand, as you do, that it really is a lack of education on a lot of people's part. So, but I'm not going to lament the poverty that we're coming out of. I really want to focus and rejoice more on the progress that we're making as individuals and as in companies and as an industry, because we are making great strides. Similarly, someone had mentioned on LinkedIn about a conservation effort. And there was I'm not going to mention the name, it was a really big conservation organization that everyone's familiar with. But I went to their website. Who was their number one sponsor? Was Beretta shotguns for hunting. Because who understands conservation better than hunters? Because they're the ones on the ground. So while we in oil and gas, we can appreciate other perspectives coming in and saying we need to do this or do that, or it could be done this way. Hey, we're the ones here on the ground. We're digging the holes. We know better than anyone else what needs to be changed and adjusted. It's just a question of
Absolutely.
education out.
And that's another problem that we've run into over the course of time, is people not in the field making the decisions, that maybe haven't been in the field before and don't understand how things work, because it doesn't always translate from the office to the field. And you have people that, I mean, they may have the best of intentions, or they may think like this is going to work great, this is a great way to move forward. But if they don't know the functionality, then they're not really the ones that should be making those decisions as far as your day to day and how things function. But to be able to communicate that back out into society, it's getting lost in translation as well. And so a lot is getting lost in translation from the offices of, the people in charge that, have the company's best interest in mind, of course, because they're working for the company.
Mhm.
But, then you as an operator or someone that's in the field trying to make it happen, your hands are somewhat tied because you don't know how to communicate that back, or you're not able to, or there's just certain standards in place, and that's what you have to work with. And then, there's not necessarily the right bridge to, the media and saying, hey, this is why we do what we do. Here's the progress we've made. And it's hard to have that strong voice. But I think that in the time that I've been in West Texas, the voice has grown stronger and also like more unified. And I see that more and more, especially in our own media circuit on LinkedIn, because oil and gas has just continued to grow
Hmm.
as a community, and everyone is very supportive for the most part, and wanting to be inclusive and share and help different service companies grow, help organizations get on their platform, be supportive. But it all has to kind of work together
Right.
for it to be of value, not only into society and what we're producing, but for the individuals and our well-being and the quality of life for the people that are out here making it happen.
No, you're right. And I think that we are at a certain inflection point because oil and gas has been around for 100 years. The companies and they've been drilling and digging out here for 100 years. But what's happened is that I think in the, let's say, the modern mass media society that we have, which of course is great because it allows everyone to have a voice. It gives us the opportunity to have a voice here today. But sometimes there's also uneducated voices speaking about subjects which, again, they don't have all the information. And I understand that people want to do good and people want to save the world. And I get that. And one time someone said something to me, and I just looked at them and I said, I believe that you're a good American. I don't believe you're going about it the right way, but I believe that you're a good American. And I'm proud of you for that, even though they were 100% in my face, like not very nice people. But that's neither here nor there. Um, but this inflection point that we're at now is where the companies are realizing, hey, there's a lot more attention on us now. There's a lot more focus on us now. We're being attacked on several levels more now. And the voices are getting stronger because of the media, right? So it is a great time. And as you say, the companies and individuals are rallying together to say, hey, we've been doing this a really long time. We pretty much provided the infrastructure for life as we know it. And now you want to come around and start telling us that, we've got dust in the corner of the kitchen or that we didn't pick up the trash, say. Well, yeah, we get that. Like we do. And this is finally, I think, the time where us as an industry and individuals are coming back and saying, hey, let's just slow down. We don't deserve any of that. You've been using modern marketing and media to push your message, but guess what? We can do exactly the same. And that's what we're doing here and hopefully educating a lot of people. And there's many levels of that. Like Alex Epstein, he's taking it like on the global level, right? I mean, world famous author. You have other voices in this space. But I like where you and I are situated, which is a little bit closer to the ground where it's actually happening, because this is the reality of it. It's not the glossy media. This is boots on the ground, and I really respect you for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, and you as well. And I think that we're finding a strong community in the oil and gas podcasting world, because it's a matter of being able to get the information out, choosing to use your narrative and not just react to the narrative that we're seeing, and just going along with it or trying to pacify because it's not worth the argument, or you can't change people's minds. And it's not so much about changing anyone's mind. It is just about putting the education out there and sharing our stories and sharing our experiences. And I mean, this is what it's like to live in West Texas. This is what it's like to work in the oil field. It can be really great, and it can be incredibly challenging and difficult, especially in the elements, especially the long hours. And when you're trying to make a deadline or you're on a project that's in a really difficult location, which is most of the
Most of the
time.
time.
And I mean, it can be so mentally draining just driving to work every day. It's dangerous.
Yep.
The roads out here, and they improve and they fall apart. It seems like almost, in a cycle where it seems like we're making progress, and then road construction comes up and nobody knows how to navigate it,
Right.
or everybody's in a hurry to get to work, and then you're put in really vulnerable situations on the highway. So everything that we're doing, and then facing that back out into the everyday American people that don't understand what oil and gas does, what petroleum makes. And I mean, they would be, I think most people, that the average American would be very surprised about what their household items are made out of,
Hmm.
and what it takes. And there's just not a lot of conversation about that. And I know for my show, I want to get a little bit more into that further down the road, getting into the specifics and learning the difference between downstream, midstream, and upstream,
Right.
and how the everything functions together, and how we are very efficient now in 2023 compared to, like you said, this has been going on for 100 years, and there has been a lot of growth over time, is doing things safer and more efficiently, and just being more conscious of what we're doing to the planet. But we're still that redheaded stepchild, so to
Yeah, so to
speak.
speak. Yeah.
And just trying to say, hey, listen, it's not all what you're hearing.
Right.
And there is another side to this conversation.
Ronald Stein, I think he's very forward leaning in terms of being an energy communicator, and he says something actually that's very prescient. He's like, we should stop using the word energy and focus more on the words electricity and products, because really that's the end result. Most consumers, most people don't ever deal with crude petroleum like we literally do. What they do is they handle the products that are the end result, the plastics, the clothing, the chips, everything that goes into all of our products every day. Focusing on the origin point is convenient because you get to sidestep everything that comes after that. Like the iPhone you are literally using to complain about oil and gas was made with oil and gas. Like, so the irony is amazing. And of course, again, they're good Americans, so we don't want to kick them while they're down, but we want to just mainly show there's another perspective to this. Take the time to understand what that perspective is. So when you do speak, you can be a little more educated about the subject, and you yourself not be so quickly brushed aside. Do you want to be brushed aside when you're discussing something? Of course you don't. So educate yourself on the subject, and now you have some intellectual legitimacy with which to stand on.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's not understanding what the products are, the end result, because you see what we're doing. And I mean, and you can look at, footage of oil and gas, and especially when it's portrayed in a certain light, it's horrifying, and it's not unreasonable to be alarmed by it.
Hmm.
And I mean, there are absolutely certain aspects still that need to be improved. And there we still have a long way to go. But to kind of look at all of it big picture, it's like what we're doing out here in the actual industrial boots on the ground experience, making it happen. You are now holding the end result in your hand. And so what you're watching, the destruction, so to speak, of what we're causing, but what we're creating is opportunity for you to have more quality of life.
Absolutely. And once again, it does go back to trusting the man who's doing the work. If you have a job, would you like to have your boss micromanaging you, especially if he doesn't even understand exactly what you're doing? And in a sense, that's what's happening here. But again, as everything is fractal, same pattern, just at a different scale. The oil and gas is out here as an industry trying to do the job that everyone depends on. But then you have people who have no clue. They want to come and micromanage. Now there's space for that because there's also a lot of bad actors, right? In everything, there will be a grifter, someone who's come to take advantage, for the quick cash grab. There's always going to be that.
Absolutely.
But that cannot define the rest of the industry, because if that was the case, this industry would have collapsed because everyone was a grifter, and everything would have collapsed behind them.
Hmm.
So you really do see, as even we saw Mr. Henry, who had passed away recently, a
Yeah.
giant in the industry. That's a man of honor, of integrity, that he didn't just build an oil company, but he actually helped sustain this entire society culture that we have here in Midland.
Right.
Because without that, where do people live? And that's something that's very important too, as you hearkened to the road construction going on here. Without Midland being a viable place for people to bring their families and live, no one's going to want to come here. Uh, I've been out to southeastern New Mexico, out in the Permian, and I can tell that God has said, I don't want you people out here. I
Right.
don't want you here. This is not a place for you. But if you're going to come, do it right. And that's what we're out here. We're out here doing a job that not just America, but the world needs. The world literally looks every day at the price of West Texas crude, right? So what we do here really is very, very important, and we need to take care of our own first. Our schools, our roads, educational opportunities, entertainment opportunities. Because if you want to have a happy operator, he needs to have a happy life. And a happy life means safe environment. You know that your values are going to remain or improve on your properties. Anything that you invest in, you're going to see a return because everyone in the community wants to invest and get a return. And I think that's part of the magic of what's going on in Midland, especially right now, especially with the vibe and the zeitgeist that we're taking part in right now.
Absolutely, I agree with that because, when I first came to West Texas, it was a very different landscape. It was bare bones, and I could only imagine, 10, 20 years before me, but just in my own unique experience, when I got out here, it was unnerving to be out in Pecos and to see the scarce resources,
Yes.
and really having to be mindful of, when things close and not everything's opened on Sunday. And, there wasn't a 24-hour anything except a truck stop.
Right.
And so that's a very different way of living. And you can see the efforts that have been put in to improve and to, like you said, for, families to be able to come out and visit, or, what can you go and do on a Sunday when you have, that sacred amount of time off from, your hitch or your, six on and seven off. And,
Right.
I mean, like the different grueling schedules that you have to keep or, working. I mean, it's any part of the oil and gas industry, it's not unheard of to say that 80 hours a week is normal. 100 hours a week is,
Yeah.
pretty reasonable. And so you're putting your mind and body through a lot, working hours like that, when a lot of the average American work week is still 40 hours.
Right.
That's
Right.
still considered full time.
Right.
And to work in the oil field, I mean,
That's
that's
cute.
part time. Yeah,
Right.
it's cute. The only time I've ever worked a 40-hour week in the oil field is if it was raining and we
Right.
were not able to physically work.
Right. Of
And
course.
a lot of times you try and get some stuff done
Of
and
course.
get out of there before the rain really came down, or
Right.
it's so muddy that you can't work on location because you're gonna make it
You're gonna
worse.
make it worse. Right. Right.
But those are the only reasons, or it's a holiday. But, otherwise you're out there, you're making it happen. And, there's guys that haven't had the time to even go wash their clothes.
Right.
And, where do you buy FR clothes at? And these are things that, no one would consider if you didn't work in oil and gas. So, I've worked in oil and gas by some of the things
Oh,
that I'm paying
absolutely.
attention to.
Yeah.
And, even going to wash your clothes or to buy new clothes, the store might not even be open. And so we have new luxuries at this junction where it is much more appealing to work in the oil field when you can order FRs off of Amazon, or, you have, uh, restaurants that cater and come to location, or if you work for a really great company that does cookouts and
Right.
employee appreciation. You don't always work for people like that. That
Right.
doesn't always happen. And so then you're living on a trucker's diet, just trying to find a few things at the truck stop on your way out to location. And and so it's you're constantly on this wheel of survival, and just trying to like hold on to these little moments of luxury. But now they're a little bit more widespread.
Hmm.
There are more truck stops that aren't just trying to grab something off the shelf. There's full blown restaurants. There's
Right.
24-hour
Right. Right.
diners. There's the man camps that have
Right.
chefs on location, that have laundry services,
Right.
and these are gold to an oil field worker. And they are luxuries, but they're also very essential. And they can make a really big difference in the quality of your day and the quality of your time in the field.
Uh, you know, I was listening obviously very intently to you the whole time, and of course you've very easily, clearly marked your oil field bona fides, so that's solid. But what you said right at the end just really brought right to my head immediately a moment I had 2 Januaries ago, and I was doing a frac south of Pecos, and I was out there. It was bitterly cold. I was not feeling well. I was on the verge of a cold. It's just one of those things where I just wasn't feeling right. And on top of it all, I had a toothache. And now you compound
Ooh,
all of those things,
yes.
and I had just started, so I'm on this location, and I'm just trying to, get my head and my butt wired together right. And luckily, there was catering, and I remember I hobbled up to that little trailer, and they gave me meat. No, it was a meatball, two meatballs with rice. I swear, I looked at that like 10 Christmas dinners put together, because I finished the meal, I went back to the unit, I sat in the unit, and then I went back and I spoke to the head cook there. And I said, I want you to know that I know you get paid for your job. I know that you're here because you're paid for that. And you're cooked because it's what's on the menu today. I said, but I want you to know that I'm one of those men that ate what you cooked. And what you did was you provided to me comfort. You provided to me warmth, literally warmth from the inside, from the food, a connection to knowing that I'm not just some random guy in a far flung location that no one cares. I said, this food means more to me than you know. And they were really taken by that. And I say that because I know for a fact a solid 75% of guys on pad feel that way, but they don't have the nuts, the gumption, the words to say it. But I know they feel it. And so, as I told you before, I feel a certain obligation to advance what I can, knowing that others can't or won't, whether it's something that has to be said or something that just should be said. And I really liked how you brought down to brass tacks what it's like for an operator trying to find a place to wash your clothes. You only can eat the food that's at the whatever market is open between where your man camp and where you have to go work on location. If it's not in between those two places, you are absolutely screwed for the next 14 hours. And that takes a lot of gumption to have to make a choice and say, well, okay, well, I'm living with this choice because I have no other, this is my choice. And I compare that to some people who get all bent out of shape. And again, not to pick, right? But people who rail against oil and gas, like, just stop oil. I get you, and I get that you cemented your hand to the ground, and man, that must have sucked. But that does not suck nearly as much as having to go and actually do the work to provide the products for you to even be able to do that. The irony in this situation is so hard that I can't even really, on some level, even take it seriously. On some level, I can't take it seriously. On another level, of course, I do, because these are human beings that they have a point of view. It's counter to ours, but I think it's from, again, lack of education. And again, falling for a lot of what the media says in terms of bad actors in our industry. If they say in the news, if it bleeds, it leads. Nobody wants to hear stories about puppies. They want to hear stories about car pileups and who did what to whom, and that's what gets the news. And so that's what riles people up. It's way more productive for the news to say, "Look what they're doing. That's so bad." Than, "Hey, did you know that without oil and gas, production is up this year, and because of that, we're able to grow our strategic national reserves, and we can actually put out more products, and we can increase our trade about." Nobody talks about it that way. And so that's part of why I think you and I are here, to bring a voice to that, because there's a lot of our industry that is just information that's sorely lacking out there.
I agree. And I think as an individual that's been in those environments, it's important to me to, just help give the oil and gas industry that positive voice now that I'm not sitting in my trailer at 6 a.m. waiting for my welder to come pick me up, wearing coveralls when it's 20 degrees outside. And I'm trying to mentally prepare to how I'm going to work in this for the next 12 hours, and, working for someone that's not very pleasant, and struggling with the lifting and the grinding. But I brought it on myself. I wanted to learn to weld, and I absolutely did. And it's very, very difficult. It's grinding, and you are not appreciated as much as you should be,
Right.
especially a rig welder. And they don't have, a lot of times they don't have pleasant dispositions. But if you've ever put on a welding hood and put on welding gloves and picked up a stinger and had made that arc, and you have smoke and you've got fire and you're getting burned, and you're making it happen, and you're making it happen faster than anybody. I've worked for great welders. I have watched them, and just in awe of their art, but they're the first to get laid off because once it's the most expensive.
Yes.
And so, once they're done, they're done. It's just like, hey, work you into the ground and then lay you off.
Right.
And you can't help but have a little bit of that animosity, so to speak, or resentment build up because it's never ending. You've invested the most money. You have everything on the back of your truck. You can show up and get pretty much anybody out of a bind. And you're the hero that's coming in to save the day, and then they're ready to just turn in your hours and tell you to take care at the end of that same day if they could get away with it.
Right.
Because it's so expensive to have a welder come on location to to pay them overtime or to pay for their truck or to pay for everything it takes to make that happen. And so I understand how difficult it must be because I've worked alongside it and I've seen it happen to so many, and they're rolling their trucks up to go to the next one and you're chasing the work. But for me, just as a helper in that short period of time that I worked in that part, it was so difficult to get up and face the day when it's January and it's so cold, and West Texas has such harsh winds.
Oh yeah.
And you're so far out that really, meatballs and rice would be like a Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
And especially when it's unexpected, or you're just so miserable, or you have so many, things going on in your own life, or you're trying to make it work, or, you're not even on that great of a project, but you still have to do the same work and you have to perform.
Right.
And, as a helper, going in and, learning how to do things and being expected to do things a certain way. And every welder is different. And even if you're doing it right, they might still yell. And, then they're teaching you how to use their cutting torch. And I can remember vividly when I'd learned how to use a cutting torch, and I was doing really well, and some of the guys were watching me, and I was very focused. I was doing everything right, and this guy is just screaming at me at the top of his lungs. And when I'd come full circle and it had fallen out, the flat piece of iron that I had been cutting, it had actually fallen out perfectly on the ground. He didn't say one word. You don't get a lot of attaboys. You don't get a lot of good jobs, and it was so difficult. And it's not that I was expecting anyone to clap or,
Right.
Congratulate me, but he had told me because he was anticipating that I was going to do something wrong. And by all means, I had made plenty of mistakes, and you always do because, with welding, there's no perfect, way of ensuring that it's going to turn out right,
Right.
or being a helper, anything like that, because you're literally using your own two hands and you're using these tools, and it's going to be a different experience every time. But I never forgot that moment, that even when you do everything right, and that's the moment of camaraderie where everyone could have recognized that I worked so hard to learn how to do this, and I was just trying to do everything the way I was supposed to. You are not recognized.
No.
And so I can see where that disposition can come in, where you're just bitter. And I've known so many rig welders that are angry and
Right.
unhappy, but you're so invested because you've bought the equipment and this is your trade.
Right.
But there's no gratitude there, and so you're just being drained and taxed.
Right.
And so it's very difficult. And so that's just another side to that same coin of working out in the elements of how difficult it is. And then you're in this very vast space that's so quiet. If you turn the welding machine off, you can't hear anything for miles, and you're just a handful of people on a location trying to make this work.
Yeah. That's such a brilliant picture that you paint about that, because it's very true. One of the things that you had asked earlier, and now is the right time to answer that question. It's like, well, what is it? Why go out there? And I have said before, people don't come out here and work in the oil field for God and country. We don't come out here for God and country, right? We come out here to get paid.
Right.
But when we're actually out in the field, it's not the money we think about. It's we think about the other man. And that's the reason why I'm out here. Because if I need help, I'm counting on someone to come help me. So I have to be the one to help someone else. Like, we need to count on one another. So I do it for my coworkers. I do it for my partner. I do it for the guys who are on shift with me on pad, because they're the only family I have at that moment. I've gotten so close with some guys from Pro Petro crews that never met before, uh, didn't know each other from Adam, but these 9 weeks that we spent together, grueling hours, man, dropping acid. I mean, 6,000 gallons worth of acid in a drop, just and the time, the teamwork that it takes, people you've never met before have to click together and work. And you have to say, well, at the minimum, you need to be professional. Well, that's very true. You have to need to be professional, but we don't go out of our way for people that we don't know, like, and trust. And so out here in West Texas, as I'm sure it is everywhere, but here, it's really who you know and how you're known. And if people know you as a reliable, solid person, that will carry you through quite a bit. And it's like everything else. If you have a pure heart and good intentions, a lot of mistakes can be forgiven because you're really just on the way to making things better. I remember that one of my very first experiences, I was working at a water plant, and I was working produced water at an injection well in an SWD, and we were getting too much water coming into the plant. I could not handle the amount of water that was coming in. So I went to the riser and I closed the valve to divert the water to another pit that they had further up the line. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. I closed the wrong valve. Came to find out the next day, I wound up blowing a 7-inch or 8-inch lay flat. I wound up blowing up one of their water transfer pumps because I had closed the valve, built up pressure, bursting the line, and breaking their pump. This is
Mm.
going to be easily 7 figures, easy 6 figures worth of damage, easy six
Wow.
figures. And my manager came to tell me what had happened. And I stood there and I was like, okay, I will wait for the company man to show for me to make my resignation. And he's like, now you don't need to do that. I said, yeah, I have to. I said, because what other statement can I make to show how much I understand the seriousness of what happened? So we're there and we're waiting, and I see the rooster tail, on the Lease road coming up, and I see the truck bouncing, and I look at my manager. He looks at me, and we're like, hey, I'm just gonna get my ass handed to me. I'm gonna get my ass handed to me, but I deserve it. Company man rolls up, gets out of the truck, looks at me, goes, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I've been better, better. I'm really, really sorry about what happened, and I think I'm gonna quit." And he looks at me, and he gave me the most grace that I ever got, and I want to share that with everyone. He said, "No, you made a mistake because you were trying to solve the situation.
Right.
You weren't lazy. It wasn't that you didn't care. You were proactive. You jumped in there to get it done. And you know what? Shit happens in the oil field."
That is very true. But not everyone would have reacted like that. And you
No,
were
I'm
right.
blessed.
The grace. But then also, like, does that fuel you with wanting to, like you said, you have so much empathy for other operators, the gratitude. It's moments like that where you won't ever forget that experience.
Never.
And that was such a pivotal moment. And it goes to show what we have here. And, to have people like that looking out for you that have that perspective, because he's absolutely right. You were trying to solve the problem, but somebody else could have looked at it very, like in that very like short term, like you made a mistake that's costing us a lot of
A lot of
money,
money.
but that's something that can be absorbed by a company. That is like shit does happen in the oil field, and to be able to value you like that, it shows a lot of his character. And so that's really great that you carried that with you, and with your show, and with wanting to reach out to other operators, you can continue that same grace.
That's really what I want to do, because we're all men and women, because it's not just men, obviously, right, who work in the field, and we all have the same struggles as everyone else does. We're all out here to take care of our families, find a way to get ahead, do the best job that we know to do, while some of us are still trying to find what is our calling. But one of my best friends was a doctor, and he was working in the oil field while he was waiting for his residencies to come up, and then he went on to be a doctor. But he gave to the oil field, and the oil field gave back to him. And I really do believe that this really is a very special place. It's a special place. an interesting industry where you can be an expert and still not know jack because the industry is so huge. There's so many facets to know and learn. And I do want to be able to give and help because I have received so much help. I've received so much knowledge, grace, forgiveness for mistakes because I've made every mistake twice, right? I've made them all and I've made them twice. So I really appreciate that. The Oilfield Leader podcast, the tagline is where operators become leaders. And it starts with you because you can't lead someone else if you can't lead yourself. So really it's a question about getting straight with who you are, why you are, and making yourself better because then you can lead with authenticity when at least you can look at someone and say, I may not be the smartest and I may not even have the answer that we're looking for, but you know what, we're going to find it together. And I'm just going to be honest about that. I mean, who's going to kick you? Who's going to kick you after you say something like that?
Right. And I think that showing up on location, kind of having that camaraderie, you're in it together, and that the guy next to you is having the same struggles, the same obstacles to overcome. And I feel that way. I don't work in the field anymore, but when I see all the women that are working in the field, I applaud them and support them because I know, and I'm glad to see that our standards of living are always improving. And the resources that we have available now are better, and they are better for women than when I was in the field. And I mean, of course, prior to that. But I don't think that it's necessarily intentionally done. It's just the oil field is very raw and unfiltered. Like what's been built in Orla as far as truck stops and man camps, that is man-made.
Yeah.
Like that is a man-made resource that people finally said, hey, if we want people to work out here, if we want people to be able to live out here, we have to install electricity and running water
Right.
and have these amenities because it's too far where like the heart of the oil field in Mentone and Orla and Jow to get from Midland to those places. I mean, it's so far. You can't really live in Midland and work in the field and have any time to sleep or do anything else. And so you have to really be as close to location to make it functional.
Right.
And so as we have been able to, see in hindsight in our own experiences, coming into, this podcasting realm that's really taken off in oil and gas, to just be able to share those stories and share the wisdom and not only share it to the ones that are now in the field that are maybe just showing up, but to the people that aren't in the field, that aren't in the industry, to maybe able to shed some of that light on the sacrifices that are made, but also the conditions that we have worked through and worked in to make this happen. And I really think that there's a lot of that leadership empathy that is evolving in our industry, especially in West Texas, where people are wanting to use their voice to lift others up and to be able to just, share that narrative that is just, kind of bottom line. Like, we're not perfect. There are a lot of things that need to improve, but this is how we function every day in this country. What we're producing out here is, worth talking about and worth, being grateful for and, being able to be proud of it. That's something that I think that we've all struggled with is, then not only being beaten down by the elements, but by those voices. So to stand up with pride and unity is something that I think that we're all really excited about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the situation, as you say, the third character in this story is the environment,
Absolutely.
right? And we frequently kind of don't mention that unless that is the focus. But there's nothing sentimental about the oil field, right? A 10,000 psi well is a 10,000 psi well, and it will blow a hole as big as the Empire State Building in the ground. Doesn't matter what you care, doesn't matter what you think about, doesn't matter who you're sorry to, doesn't matter how pretty you think it is. Things are what they are. They're very heavy, they're very cold, they're very dangerous. And as my friend, great friend Jim Lin says, when people make mistakes in the oil field, one, someone has to pay for that mistake. There's no free lunches. And second, those mistakes are very, very expensive. So how do you take a guy or girl, put them in this environment, give them a wicked hard job that could potentially cost their lives, and then you just ride that stark coldness to the end through your management, through your leadership? It's like everything, there has to be a balance,
Right.
right? So even in my logo for the oilfield leader, what is it? It's classic oilfield iconography, right? It's the skull with the hard hat and the wrench and a sledgehammer,
Hmm.
because that is traditional oilfield iconography.
Absolutely.
But what do I have on behind it? I have a heart, because it takes a heart to be a leader. It takes a heart to recognize what other people are going through and be able to put a voice to that so they can feel comfortable even beginning to express. How many men have not had positive role models in their lives? Statistics show actually that approximately 50% of students today in grades between 2 and 8 either don't have a father in the home or have an emotionally absent father, right? And unfortunately, a lot of these guys are in our industry as well. See, these are men who are willing to do the job, but in some ways they're broken men, right? But still, they do the work that we demand and we put on their backs. And we say, yeah, I'm really sorry for that. Get your ass out there. I don't care. Get your ass out there, because if not, I'm going to find someone else who will. And you
Yeah.
take your broken heart, right? And you take the pictures of your kids and you put it in your pocket and you go out there, right? So who stands for those guys? Who's there to say, it's going to be okay? You have to always be thinking, and it's like everything else in life, right? You have to be thinking on two tiers at the same time. One, I don't want to lose my hand, so I'm going to make sure I don't have it in this machine, right? While it's going on when you're on pad. And the other level, like we said before, is okay, the mortgage is going to be due. We're going to maybe sell the house. I have to get this prepared when I get back home. I have to deal with the real estate agents. Okay, there's a lot of things you're dealing with at the same time. And I want to be able to offer a voice to operators to say, I can handle my life. It doesn't have to be grind up and spit out. I don't have to be another also ran. A lot, because like me, everyone has a dream. And a lot of guys and girls are finding a way to make their dream happen through the oil and gas industry. And I think that's magic, because it's happening, right? We all need oil and gas and the electricity and the products that come thereafter, but it's also a place for people to get their dreams done and make their dreams come true. And this is just such an exciting place to be at such an exciting time, especially what we're doing. I have nothing but the most enthusiasm and optimism for what we're doing.
I agree. And I share in that sentiment because, again, hindsight is 2020. And if I would have known how much those really challenging experiences were going to shape me, I think, maybe I could have had more enthusiasm at the time. And I mean, I was grateful. I was always grateful for my job, grateful for what I was learning, grateful for, succeeding and learning how to run a piece of equipment,
Right.
or, learning how to weld or use a cutting torch, or, learning, other avenues. I mean, there's so many different things that I did, like growing. I grew as a person, and I
Yeah.
grew in my career. And I can look back on it and with nostalgia.
Yes.
Like, I mean, sometimes I see, I mean, just in road construction, especially now being in Midland, the different pieces of equipment that I know that I could get on, and I could work alongside them. And
Yeah.
I'm not doing that, but,
Yeah.
there's a sense of pride that it
Absolutely.
was, a lot of times it was scary and, widely criticized or doubted, or if I couldn't do something or didn't understand how to do something, but then you work through it and, being very calm
Hmm.
under pressure. And so I can look back with, nothing but gratitude for my experiences, the good and the bad,
Of
because,
course.
you cannot sugarcoat the oil field.
No.
I don't care how many hot meals we get, it's still mentally challenging,
Very.
but it's shaping. And so as you're, doing these things to pay your mortgage or make your dreams come true, you are building your character,
Right.
and there is an appreciation for life that is ingrained in you when
Absolutely.
you're working 7 days a week, and leaving at 3 o'clock on Sunday is your weekend.
Right.
and you savor those few hours. And I think that you learn how to value what you have and value what you've done. And so, for us, I agree, especially with, having a podcast to give that voice and the encouragement of, the men and women that are making those drives out to location every day, or they're coming in, or, they're wondering what they're doing it for. You're not alone.
Right.
And it's part of it. It's part of the experience.
Yes.
From the frigid temperatures to the extreme heat, being on a caliche pad in July when it's 1:15 at 10 a.m. and there is just nothing but the hot sun above you and your own willpower to get through the
Yeah.
day because you need the money, or
Right.
you're working with your brother, or you don't want to quit on your crew, or whatever the reason is, but mentally you're struggling being there.
Yeah.
So to be able to offer a little bit of comfort and guidance and saying, hey, if you've been there, if you've been out there, then it's somewhat of a rite of passage, and
Yeah.
you should be proud of the work that you've done, and you deserve to chase your dreams and have them come true, and you have made a difference despite what other people may say.
No, you're right, and you're absolutely right. You even mentioned something earlier. Oh, most people work a 40-hour work week, and out here we say that's really nice. We do that too before breakfast on Tuesday, right? We've already
Right.
done 40 hours, so don't come over here. And I've even said, and I'm not ashamed to say this, right? I was a full-fledged adult when I came to the oil field, but the oil field turned me into a man. And that was something that I will always and forever be grateful for, because it gave me a lot of experiences that challenged what I thought I believed. It gave me a lot of experiences that challenged what I thought I could do. And it made me grow as an individual. And sometimes I tell a lot of my friends, see, but the problem is now you don't have any excuse, because nothing in the civilian world is as hard as it is on pad. So don't get out of the field and tell me, well, I can't do that. That's too hard. Dude, do you work in oil and gas, man? Don't tell me that this is too difficult to clean your garage out, right? As I have to clean my garage out. These are just the things that they have to be done. And if you can work in the oil field, which also I say, like 6 months in the oil field is like the equivalent of 2 years at any other job.
Oh, very well said. Absolutely. And you do get conditioned for it. You get used to the drive. You can almost like put on a podcast, or listen to some music, and that's your morning drive. And especially people that are local to West Texas,
Hmm.
it's not unheard of that if it's less than 100 miles one way, you'll drive it.
Absolutely. Without a
Before
doubt.
you'll move, you will drive 100 miles one way just to start your day.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
you turn around and drive those same 100 miles home. And if you can get off location at 4:45, those extra 15 minutes are coveted,
Oh, yes. Yes. No.
because you might get home before the sun goes down,
Right.
and you can kind of experience that sense of normalcy,
Yes.
and you value it. And you don't value things like that when you are working 40 hours a week, or you have a 15-minute commute. You don't know what it's like, but that's part of the oil field life.
My brother and I, we frequently joke because all these insomnia medicines, and these it's you can't sleep at night. You have like, well, the problem is like you said, you drove in a car maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'll even give you 45 minutes, right, in a city trying to get to your job, but you sat in an office all day.
Right.
And then what did you do? You drove back home and you sat on a sofa, maybe, for the most part. You expended no energy whatsoever. No wonder you can't sleep, because your body is meant to move. Your body is meant to expend the energy. And if you don't, it's going to come out one way or another, right?
Absolutely.
And at least for us in ONG, like, we get out there and you're putting in the work. I would, like you said, those 15 minutes, I remember so badly trying to get back to the hotel before the sun came up. I'm like, if I can get into the bed, if I can shower and I can get into the bed before the sun starts to come up and I can close my eyes while it's still dark out, I feel like I won for the day.
You really do.
Yeah.
I mean, those small wins are victories.
Yeah, huge.
And like if you've got your laundry done already,
Yes.
or you don't need to go anywhere else, I mean, you can really indulge.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but you get into that mindset. And so to work in oil and gas, to work in West Texas like that, you have to develop the mindset. You have to have the grit, and you have to be able to withstand and it's really going to be the most valuable time in your life that's going to set you up for success if you're willing to see it like that.
Exactly. A lot of times in the science fiction movies, people go back in time and they're afraid to do something. You ever seen that trope, right? Well, if I do that, I'm going to change the line of history. But what I find really interesting is that no one today thinks, what little thing can I do today is going to really drastically change my future? And but we're full of those magic moments every day. Take that action. If you have an idea, make that phone call. Start working on your idea. Um, Talk to your partner and admit you are wrong. Whatever it is, start making the move on it because it's your life and your future, and you're going to get there at the end. But where, who knows? Until you decide and you design it, and that's been very vital to me. And I really want to help share that message.
I agree. And I'm really excited about your show and what you're doing. And I wish you the best of luck. And I appreciate you coming on today. It's been really great talking to you,
Oh,
Christian.
it's been my pleasure. Thank you very, very much for having me on and allowing me to spotlight. I'm super proud of you and what you're doing. You have gotten so much traction, so much energy. And I think that people, it's no pun intended, right? And I think that people are just sensing the energy and the passion coming out of you and your project and seeing the value that you're creating for everyone out of nothing. And I think that's what's attractive and that's what's going to set this on fire. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that encouragement.
Absolutely.